They judged you before they knew you. They criticized you when you were at your lowest, and when you finally had the courage to do something different with your life, they criticized you for that too. You stayed silent, and they called you indifferent. You spoke from the heart, and they said you were too much. You were kind, and they saw it as weakness. You stood firm, and they called you arrogant, and you, not knowing how to handle it all, just swallowed it, like swallowing glass, like trying not to break inside while smiling on the outside. Afraid to speak your mind, guilty for being who you are, ashamed of what you feel. Why? Because somewhere along the way, you learned that criticism hurts, that other people's opinions are heavy, that being judged means being rejected, and that to survive you had to work hard to please. So you began living for others, making decisions based on what they'll say, hiding parts of yourself that didn't fit, silencing your thoughts, changing how you dressed, softening your voice, just to avoid upsetting anyone. But over time you realized something harsher. No matter how hard you try, they'll criticize you anyway. And that's one of the most painful, yet freeing truths you can accept. You can live flawlessly, give to others, work hard, do everything right, and still someone will judge you, look down on you, envy you, or speak badly of you. Sometimes because of what you do, sometimes because of what you don't do, and often simply because of who you are. Because criticism isn't about you, it's about them, their insecurities, their fears, their biases, their unhealed pain. But until you understand that, you'll keep giving away your peace to every hurtful word. You'll keep carrying guilt that isn't yours. You'll keep shrinking yourself to fit into molds never made for you. And that breaks you, not all at once, but in tiny emotional fractures, day after day, comment after comment, reproach after reproach, until one day you wake up and don't know who you are without the filter of others' judgment. Has that happened to you? Have you found yourself holding back an opinion to avoid an argument? Have you doubted your worth just because someone criticized you with confidence? Have you quit something you loved for fear of being ridiculed? Then this episode is for you. Because you're not here to please everyone. You're not here to live up to others' expectations. You're not here to avoid judgment. You're here to be you, with everything that comes with it, with your story, with your mistakes, with your scars, with your convictions, with your unique way of seeing the world. But to hold that without breaking, you need more than self-esteem. You need emotional training. You need inner strength. You need a practical philosophy that reminds you that criticism isn't the enemy. Your reaction to it is. And you won't find that training in motivational quotes or empty promises. You'll find it in Stoicism, a philosophy that doesn't teach you to ignore pain, but to strengthen yourself until it no longer rules you. Because criticism won't go away. There will always be someone with something to say, but you can stop receiving it as a wound and start seeing it as noise, as an echo that no longer touches your core, as words that pass through because they're no longer yours. And that's not indifference, it's clarity, it's emotional maturity, it's freedom. What we'll share today isn't a list of tips to clap back or win arguments. You're not here to become someone who always has the last word. You're here to become someone who no longer needs validation, someone who doesn't shrink in the face of criticism, someone who isn't poisoned by another's opinion, someone who doesn't betray themselves just to be liked, because you're not obligated to explain your life. You don't have to justify your decisions. You don't need permission to be who you are, but you do need firmness to stand your ground, temperance to stay upright, awareness to resist outside pressure, and humility to hear what's useful and let go of what's not. That's the goal. Not to be untouchable, but to be whole. Not to stop feeling, but to stop yielding. Not to avoid criticism, but to be immune to it. And if that's what you're looking for, you're exactly where you need to be. This is not a place to shout louder. It's a place to root your soul, to learn to live with clarity, even when fingers are pointed at you, to choose emotional freedom over others' judgment. Because peace isn't in others' silence. It's in your inner steadiness, in your ability not to lose yourself every time you're judged. This is where that practice begins, and it will be uncomfortable, it will be challenging, but it will also be one of the bravest decisions you'll ever make. To stop living under the weight of what others think, and start living in peace with yourself. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by commenting, "From today on, I will not be a slave to my emotions." That phrase will be your anchor, a reminder that you're here to reclaim your inner power, not to keep reacting from your wounds. This is the moment to prove to yourself that your peace doesn't depend on how you feel, but on what you choose to do with what you feel. Without further ado, let's begin. Stoic lesson. First, those who criticize speak from their own lack. You've been criticized more times than you can count, sometimes directly, with harsh, raw, unfiltered words. Other times with silences that weigh more than shouting, with judgmental looks, with comments disguised as good intentions, with phrases that start with, "I'm telling you this because I care," and end up leaving you with an invisible wound no one else notices, but you can't stop feeling. And the most confusing part is that many of those criticisms came from people close to you. Family, friends, partners, people you let into your world without defenses. People whose opinions not only reached your ears but deeply affected you. So how could it not hurt? How could you not take it personally when the one criticizing you is someone who should know you? How could you not break when, just at your most vulnerable, someone used your flaws as a weapon? How could you not doubt yourself when even those closest to you question your worth? The Stoic answer is not to deny the pain. It's not to harden as if nothing matters. On the contrary, it's about looking beyond the judgment and understanding where that criticism truly comes from. Marcus Aurelius wrote it this way, with a calm only someone who has seen the human soul bare can possess. When another blames you or hates you, or when men throw insults at you, go to their souls, penetrate within, and see what sort of men they are. That's what we do here. We look into the soul of the one who criticizes. Because only when you understand this can you stop carrying what was never yours to begin with. Only when you realize that criticism says more about the other than it does about you, can you start letting go of its weight. Someone who harshly criticizes you probably doesn't know how to treat themselves with compassion. Someone who mocks your sensitivity likely fears showing their own. Someone who loudly points out your flaws may be unable to face their own in silence. And someone who judges you for being bold is probably postponing their own dreams. But you cannot go on living burdened by other people's shadows. You can't spend your life explaining every move, asking for permission to exist, adjusting yourself to avoid being judged. Because if you do, you lose yourself. You dissolve, and you end up living a version of yourself that's not free, but programmed by fear. The Stoic learns to see criticism for what it is, emotional projection. And from that deep understanding, peace arises. Because you no longer ask, "Why did they say that? What did I do wrong? Is what they think about me true?" Instead, you shift the question into something much wiser. What's going on inside that person that they said this? What lack drives them to project this onto me? And why should I allow their fears into my mind? That's not arrogance, it's clarity. It's the healthy boundary a Stoic draws between the external and the internal, between what they receive and what they let pass, between what they hear and what they choose not to carry. Yes, sometimes a criticism may contain something useful, something that points out an inconsistency, a way to improve, a blind spot. But you'll only be able to see that with wisdom if you're no longer wounded by the judgment. Only from a calm place can you discern between a criticism that builds and one that merely projects. Because when you're wounded, every word stings. But when you're centered, you gain perspective. Not from emotion, but from virtue. That's where the practice lies. Next time someone criticizes you, don't respond right away. Breathe, Stay silent, and in your mind repeat this. This criticism says more about their world than mine. It doesn't define me, it doesn't pierce me, it brushes past and moves on. What they say stays with them unless I choose to make it mine. Because in truth, you are in control, not of what the other says, but of what you allow into your soul. And that filter is called awareness. That wall is called temperance. That shield is called lived philosophy. When you do this inner work, something shifts. You no longer defend yourself desperately. You no longer feel the need to explain your worth. You no longer seek approval disguised as humility. You simply walk with firmness, with coherence, with peace. And if someone criticizes, you observe. And if someone judges, you filter. And if someone tries to wound, you choose not to carry that poison. Because you understand their judgment isn't your reflection, it's their mirror. And you no longer want to see yourself through a shattered glass. You are shaping your own reflection from virtue, from truth, from your center. That is your power. That is where your freedom begins. And no external judgment has any authority over that. Stoic lesson. Second, criticism only hurts if you accept it as truth. Words have power, but only if you give it to them. Someone might tell you, you're not good at this, and if you believe it, it hurts. Someone might call you unstable, and if you accept it, you lose your balance. They might judge you, label you, belittle you. But those words on their own don't have the power to hurt you. It's your mind that lets them in. Epictetus taught this with brutal clarity. We are not disturbed by what others say, but by what we think about what they say. And in that sentence lies the key to finally freeing yourself from the pain that criticism causes. Most of the time, outside judgment doesn't hurt because of what it is, but because of what it activates within you. If someone throws a criticism that doesn't resonate with you, it probably won't affect you. But if there's a part of you that doubts, if there's insecurity, if there are unresolved wounds, then that criticism pierces like an arrow into open flesh. And not because it's true, but because you already feared it. That's why, when someone says something that hurts, the first step isn't to defend yourself. The first step is to look within, not to blame yourself, but to observe honestly. Why is this affecting me? What part of me gave these words authority? What wound are they touching that hasn't healed yet? When you do that, you stop fighting outside and start healing inside. Because if criticism still dominates you, it's not because the other person is right. It's because you still don't feel solid in your truth. And that's not weakness, it's humanity. We all have sensitive points, areas where we still doubt ourselves, wounds that aren't visible, but they're there, waiting for someone to say just the right word to activate the pain. And when it happens, we react. We get angry, shut down, defend ourselves, stay silent. But we rarely question ourselves. That's what Stoicism proposes, to replace reaction with reflection, to view every emotion as a compass, to use every criticism as a chance to examine your inner world. Because when you realize the pain doesn't come from outside, but from what you believe about the outside, you reclaim your power. You don't need to change the other person. You don't need to convince anyone. You only need to stop validating what isn't yours. Criticism only becomes a wound when you accept it as truth. But if you learn to observe it without absorbing it, to hear it without identifying with it, to filter it with your own criteria, then it can no longer hurt you. And that is true emotional power, deciding which words are allowed into your mind and which ones stay out. Picture this. You're in a meeting, presenting an idea, and someone says, "I don't think that'll work. You don't have enough experience." If you believe you're not capable, that sentence will crush you. But if you know your worth, what you've studied, what you've built, that criticism drifts past, like a leaf in the wind. No weight, no poison and no echo, because you chose not to make it yours. And that's the difference between suffering and learning. It's not about ignoring all judgment. It's about not accepting as truth what doesn't build you, about consciously choosing what defines you and what doesn't. And yes, it may be hard at first, because you've spent years believing what others say holds more weight than your own voice, because you grew up seeking approval, because you learned that if someone criticizes you, it must mean you did something wrong. But now you have another option, to unlearn that. You can choose to turn each criticism into a question, not a sentence. You can ask yourself, is this true? Does this help me grow? Or is it just someone else's projection I don't need to carry? And if the answer doesn't add value, let it go, without guilt, without needing to defend yourself, without resentment. Because the criticism you don't accept can't hurt you, and the criticism you understand can set you free. What others say about you has no power until you decide to give it power. And if you decide it no longer has any, then you've taken a huge step toward emotional freedom. Remember this, your mind is your most sacred space. Not everyone deserves access. Not every word deserves to stay. Not every criticism deserves your attention, and you have the right and the responsibility to guard that space with firmness. So the next time someone criticizes you, don't rush to respond. Don't rush to swallow the blame. Pause, breathe, and ask yourself, is this truth or just noise? And then decide. With calm, with clarity, with consciousness. That's what a Stoic would do. And it's what you can start practicing from today. Doubting yourself every time someone criticizes you doesn't mean you're weak. It only reveals that you're still handing your worth to others. If you've ever felt reduced by words that don't define you, subscribing may seem like a simple click, but here it's an act of freedom. It allows us to keep creating this space for those who no longer want to live controlled by outside opinions. Here, you'll learn to stay true to yourself, even when questioned. Your firmness is not arrogance, it's dignity. Stoic lesson. Third, seeking approval is the fastest path to suffering. We all want to be accepted. Since childhood, we long for a glance that validates us, a voice that says, "You're fine just as you are," hands that hold us when we feel we don't belong. But there comes a point in life, and hopefully that point is today, when you must ask yourself with brutal honesty, how much am I betraying myself just to be liked? How many times have I silenced my truth just to avoid rejection? How many times have I dressed in what was expected, behaved as I was supposed to, pretended to agree, just to not make others uncomfortable? The need for approval may seem harmless, but it's one of the subtlest forms of emotional slavery. And no one explained it as clearly as Seneca when he said, "Nothing is more miserable than depending on others' opinions to know whether you are happy or not." If you need others to agree with you in order to feel at peace, then that peace isn't truly yours. It's borrowed, conditional, fragile, and worse, it can vanish at any moment, with a criticism, with a cold look, with a malicious phrase, with a comment on social media. When you live depending on the likes, the "you speak so well," the "I admire you so much," you are giving yourself away completely. You're letting someone else decide your worth, and there's no greater prison than that. Because the day they disapprove of what you do, you'll feel broken. The day they disagree with your path, you'll question whether you should change it. The day they don't acknowledge you, you'll feel invisible. And all that for building your identity on a foundation you don't control. Stoicism is blunt on this point. Freedom begins when your own judgment is enough to live in peace. When your inner compass is stronger than any applause or rejection from outside. Because yes, recognition can feel good, but it must not be necessary. Because yes, it's nice when someone values what you do, but it must not be your fuel. Because yes, it may hurt when others don't understand you, but it must not destroy you. And here's where many go wrong. They think emotional strength means not needing anyone. And that's not it. Stoic strength isn't isolation. It's being able to be among the crowd without losing yourself in it. It's being able to live, share, love without dependence. When you act seeking approval, every decision becomes a strategy. You don't live, you perform. You don't flow, you edit. You don't express, you calculate. And the worst part, often you don't even know what you truly want, because you're too busy wondering what others want from you. But living like this comes at a cost. You lose authenticity, you lose energy, and the most painful of all, you lose time. Time you could be using to grow in what you love. Time you could be devoting to building a path with meaning. Time that won't come back. That's why this lesson matters so much, because every minute you live to please others is a minute not lived for yourself. Stoicism offers you a clear way out. Live in alignment with your nature. Marcus Aurelius repeated it over and over in his meditations. The best way to live is to be oneself and act in harmony with what nature expects of you. And that nature is none other than your essence, your values, your purpose, your inner voice. When you do that, criticism no longer stings the same way, because you're not waiting to be validated. You're simply expressing who you are, and when that's real, it needs no explanation. Look around. How many people live exhausted, anxious, frustrated, just from trying to meet expectations that were never truly theirs? How many feel empty after achieving what everyone wanted, but not what they desired? That's what happens when approval becomes your compass. You end up in a place you don't recognize, and you don't even know how you got there, but you're still in time to reclaim your center, in time to ask yourself, do I want this for me, or because someone else told me I should? And if the answer is the latter, let it go, without guilt, without fear, without resentment, because every time you choose your truth, even if it's unpopular, you are freeing yourself. And even if it hurts at first, even if people look at you strangely, even if you lose applause, what you gain is immense: your peace, your integrity, your freedom. You didn't come to this world to please everyone. You came to be who you are, and if that bothers someone, let them be bothered. But you don't have to carry the guilt. The next time you feel the urge to change yourself to be accepted, remember this: anyone who demands you betray yourself in order to be loved does not love you. And anyone who truly loves you will never ask you to stop being you. So today, make yourself a promise. I will live from my truth, not to please, but to honor who I am. That is the first step to stop suffering for approval, and the beginning of a life that is authentic, firm, and profoundly yours. Stoic lesson 4th. No one judges from your real experience. It's easy to have opinions from the outside. It's easy to point fingers when you don't carry the weight. It's easy to criticize when you haven't lived the story. But you know what you've been through. You know what it's cost you to get out of bed each morning. You know how many times you cried in silence so no one would see you. You know the sacrifices you made, the fears you faced, the times you fell, and still you tried again. And yet, all it takes is one sentence, one look, one comment, one cold and shallow judgment, for someone to think they have the right to define who you are. But here's something you must be very clear about. Those who judge from the outside have no idea what burns inside. Marcus Aurelius wrote it with precision. Every external judgment is partial, because it arises from what the other perceives, not from who you truly are. And what does the other see? A fragment, a piece, an isolated scene from the full movie that is your life. And still, they speak. Still, they label you. Still, they say what you should have done, how you should have felt, or how well you're doing, by their standards. But what are they comparing you to? To their own story, to their own beliefs, to their own wounds, not to your reality, not to your battles, and not to your context. That's why it's so unfair to live based on what others think, because they're judging a distorted version of you, a version built from their own limitations, not from your truth. And the most painful part is, sometimes you believe them. You swallow that opinion. You turn it into your inner voice, and you let it shape you, define you, hurt you. But today, I want you to understand something that could set you free. No one can judge you fairly unless they've lived your entire story. No one. Not your family, not your friends, not your colleagues, not people on social media. No one. Only you know what has shaped you. Only you know the limits you've surpassed. Only you know the decisions you had to make in the middle of chaos. And that doesn't mean you're perfect. It means you're human. And as a human, you're in process, in construction, in evolution. That's why Stoicism insists so strongly on this. Do not be disturbed by what others think. Focus on what you do. Because if you spend your energy trying to justify yourself, trying to explain every step, defending every choice, then you're draining your strength in a useless war, trying to get someone who hasn't walked in your shoes to understand the path you chose. And that's not your task. Your task is not to educate every critic. Your task is not to convince every observer. Your task is to live with clarity, with coherence, with awareness. And from that place, let go. Let go of the need for approval. Let go of the guilt for not being understood. Let go of the anxiety of not meeting others' expectations, because those expectations often have nothing to do with you. They're projections, they're fears, they're frustrations disguised as advice. And do you know one of the greatest emotional traps? Believing others know you better than you know yourself. That's false. They see you from the outside. You live yourself from the inside. And that difference is immense. You feel what happens to you. They only interpret. You know your motives. They only see the results. That's why instead of trying to fit into others' opinions, ask yourself, am I being faithful to what I know is right for me? That's the only fair measure. That's the compass that never fails. And if one day you doubt, if a criticism hurts you, if you fall into the trap of wanting to justify yourself again, remember this. People only see the chapter you're showing. They don't know the previous ones. They don't know what you had to go through to get here. So don't let them define you. Let yourself be defined by your effort, by your courage, by your ability to keep going when no one understood why you still tried. That is your truth, and it's more valuable than any external judgment. From now on, when someone criticizes you, take a deep breath. Don't react. Don't justify yourself, and don't play their game. Just say to yourself, you don't know what I've lived through, and I don't need you to know to keep moving forward. That's Stoic attitude. That's real inner strength. The kind that needs no explanations, the kind that doesn't beg for understanding, the kind that knows the only approval that matters is your own. Stoic lesson 5. Silence is also an answer. There's a subtle and quiet trap many fall into when they're criticized, the immediate need to defend themselves, to clarify, justify, explain, react. It's almost instinctive. Someone throws a judgment at us and our ego kicks in, as if suddenly our dignity depended on correcting them, on proving them wrong, on imposing our version of the truth. But the truth is, in many cases, the effort to explain yourself only fuels the game of someone who wants to destabilize you. And by stepping into that dynamic, without realizing it, you give them exactly what they were looking for, your energy. Epictetus said it clearly. Do not respond with anger to insults. Their action is theirs. Your reaction is yours too. And that reaction, even if it's silence, is your choice. Here enters one of the most challenging virtues of Stoicism, the art of purposeful silence. But how do you achieve that in a world filled with noise? In an era where everyone seems to have an opinion about everything, and where we've been taught that staying quiet equals weakness or lack of character, how do you know when to speak and when to remain silent? The answer lies in your peace. If speaking robs you of peace, if it pushes you to justify yourself, lose emotional control, or engage in useless battles, then silence becomes your greatest strength. It's not about repression, but selection. It's not about avoiding conflict, but about prioritizing what matters, your inner balance. Many don't understand that not responding doesn't mean submission. It's often a declaration of power. Silence can be an unbreakable wall against empty verbal attacks. An invisible shield that shows your worth doesn't depend on always having the last word. That your identity is not up for debate. That you don't need to prove anything in order to stay at peace with yourself. Remember, the one who needs to shout lacks arguments. The one who tries to hurt you with words is already hurting inside. And the one who needs your reaction is only trying to validate their own emptiness. Don't feed that cycle. Don't join the game. Because if there's one thing a Stoic knows, it's this. Not every battle is worth fighting. Some are won by not engaging, others by simply not being there, and some by letting time and silence speak for you. Think of the times you defended yourself and ended up exhausted. Did you really achieve anything? Did you change their opinion? Did you heal something within you? Most of the time, no. You just lost energy, hours of sleep, inner peace, trying to correct someone who didn't want to see. But when you stand firm in your silence, when you hold on to self-control and choose not to fall into the trap, you grow on the inside. You get stronger. You become like a rock in the wind, because only those who master themselves can ignore the external noise. Marcus Aurelius put it this way: the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. And that difference starts with not lowering yourself to the same level, not answering every criticism, not acting from the wound, but from virtue. Some criticisms deserve to be heard, others only deserve your indifference. Knowing the difference is wisdom. But even when a criticism touches a sensitive spot, you can breathe, acknowledge the emotion, and still choose not to react. You can notice how your body tenses, how your mind wants to respond, and still decide not to. That is power. That is emotional mastery. That is freedom. And yes, someone will say, but if I don't defend myself, won't others think they're right? Let them think. Small minds will always search for interpretations that match their limited worldview. You're not here to meet others' expectations. You're here to live in alignment with your values, not with someone else's fears. Silence is not the absence of response. It is, many times, the highest response, because there's no argument more powerful than the serenity of someone who doesn't need to win an argument to be at peace. And when you achieve this, when you can truly remain calm in the face of judgment, then you'll know you've transcended the power of criticism. So I invite you to reflect. Which criticisms steal your peace? Who has learned they can control you with their words? To whom are you giving your energy by feeling the need to respond? Pause. Breathe. You don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need the last word. You don't need to explain your truth to someone who's not ready to hear it. Your silence is not weakness. It is maturity. It is power. It is freedom. Stoic lesson 6th. If you don't respect the critic, ignore the criticism. Imagine for a moment that you're walking down the street and a stranger yells at you, "You're a failure." Now think about your reaction. Do you stop? Does it affect you? Do you change your whole day because of those words? Probably not, because you don't know that person, and more importantly, you don't respect their opinion. So why do you let certain comments from people you barely value hurt you so much? The answer is simple but uncomfortable. Deep down, you're still giving power to voices that don't deserve it. Not because they've earned it, but because you've unknowingly handed it over. Epictetus put it bluntly, it's not things that harm us, but our opinion about them. And that opinion includes the value we assign to those who criticize us. If the source of the criticism is not worthy of respect, then neither is their judgment, and yet we carry it as if it came from a wise person. How many times have you lost your peace over a comment from someone whose life you don't even admire? How many times have you doubted yourself because of a remark said without compassion, knowledge, or the intention to help? Criticism from someone you don't respect should carry the same weight as a whisper in the wind. But it's hard, because we were raised to seek validation, to be liked, to crave approval, even from those who haven't earned it. The Stoic lesson here is clear. Don't give emotional authority to someone who hasn't shown wisdom, integrity, or empathy. Ask yourself honestly, does this person live virtuously? Do they act with coherence? Do they lead a life I would admire? Have they walked a path of truth and personal growth? If the answer is no, then their words don't deserve to be planted in your mind. You can hear them, yes, but you don't have to adopt them, defend yourself from them, or believe them. Seneca said, "The wise man is not shaken by insult, because he knows the insult does not define him." This isn't arrogance, it's discernment. It's knowing how to distinguish criticism that comes from virtue from that which comes from ignorance or frustration. Many who criticize aren't trying to help. They're projecting their own insecurities onto you. They act from fear of self-awareness, from envy, from their inability to build something meaningful. So instead, they tear down what they don't understand. They are hollow voices making noise because they've never learned to resonate with purpose. And you? Will you live reacting to every noise, or will you guard your peace like a Stoic, with firmness, with clarity, with boundaries? Learning to ignore is a form of self-love, not to reject all criticism, but to rank it. Because some criticism can help you grow, but only if it comes from someone with deep roots. Imagine you are a tree, a strong tree that has survived storms, winters, and droughts. And a child comes along, knowing nothing of weather or roots, and says, "You should have different colored flowers." Will you tear down your branches because of that? Or will you remain standing, knowing only you truly understand the journey you've walked? Emotional maturity shows when you learn to distinguish what deserves your energy and what doesn't. When you stop living to explain, defend, or please everyone. When you understand that your peace cannot depend on the judgment of every voice around you. And no, it's not about being insensitive, it's about choosing wisely, building an inner wall that filters, observes, evaluates. Not all criticism is garbage, but not all of it is gold either. Your task is to know the difference. Make a list. Write it down if necessary. List the people whose opinions truly matter to you. Ask yourself why you respect them. Then compare that list with those who criticize you most. Do they match? If not, the answer is simple. You owe them no explanation. A Stoic isn't someone who doesn't listen. They are someone who listens with discernment. Someone who remains centered even when outside voices try to shake them. Someone who understands that criticism is inevitable, but suffering because of it is optional. And that often the greatest act of self-love is to look at the critic with compassion and keep walking. Today, if someone criticizes you, pause for a second, not to defend yourself, but to ask, do I truly respect this person? If the answer is no, then smile inwardly, because you've just reclaimed a little more of your emotional freedom, a freedom that can't be bought, inherited, or faked. It is built each time you decide not to be defined by voices that don't know your soul. That is the path of the Stoic. And now that you know it, the rest is up to you. If you've made it this far, it means you're ready to stop letting others' opinions define your worth. Subscribe and comment, "I am more than their words," to reaffirm your commitment to a life in peace with yourself. This is just the first step toward an existence where criticism no longer shapes your essence. By the 9th lesson, you'll uncover a revelation that could free you from years of emotional dependence. Don't miss it. It may be the shield your soul has been waiting for. Let's keep going. Stoic lesson. 7th, your actions speak louder than any criticism. There is something profoundly liberating in stopping the argument with the world. In realizing that no matter how much you explain, justify, or defend yourself, there will always be someone who misinterprets your intentions, questions your decisions, or criticizes the way you choose to live. And yet, you keep fighting to convince, to please, to be understood. But tell me, how many times have you felt that your words are not enough? That no matter how many arguments you give, the criticism persists, that your effort, your dedication, your motives continue to be reduced to a shallow judgment. It's frustrating and exhausting, until you realize a powerful truth that Marcus Aurelius repeated time and time again. Don't respond with words, respond by living. Because when your actions are coherent, you don't need to convince anyone. When your life is steady, your decisions are clear, and your direction is constant, even the most skeptical begin to fall silent, not because you've won the argument, but because you've earned moral authority. The Stoic doesn't waste energy defending themselves from every criticism, not because they don't care, but because they know that coherence has a power words can't reach. A life lived with virtue is a statement no one can refute. There is no message more powerful than a consistent example. There is no stronger defense than a clean track record. There is no better way to silence external judgment than to walk firmly without altering your path for every fleeting opinion. And that's the key, not just to move forward, but to move forward with virtue. Because if you respond to criticism with hatred, criticism wins. If you respond to offense with resentment, offense wins. But if you keep growing in silence, if you keep cultivating your character, if you keep walking your purpose, then you win. Not by defeating anyone, but by not abandoning yourself. Think of the people who have impacted you most in life. Were they great orators, or simply people who lived with integrity, even if no one applauded them? Coherence doesn't need a microphone. It speaks in every action, in every sacrifice made out of loyalty to your values, in every boundary set without raising your voice, in every moment when you choose peace over the need to be right. Seneca said that the wise man is self-sufficient, not out of pride, but because he has learned that the greatest victory is to stay true to one's virtue when everything else tries to provoke you. And yes, it hurts sometimes. It hurts when your efforts go unrecognized. It hurts when you're criticized by those who don't know your story. It hurts when your silence is misunderstood. But when you learn to stand firm in yourself, that pain no longer controls you, because you understand that your goal is not to silence criticism. Your goal is to live so firmly that criticism becomes irrelevant. Look around you. Many talk, few do. Many opine, few building, many judge, few face themselves. And you, which group do you belong to? Each day is an opportunity to decide whether you'll live reacting to noise or become a presence so clear that the noise can't touch you. Are you criticized for being firm? Be firmer. Are you criticized for setting boundaries? Set them with more love and clarity. Are you criticized for not following the crowd? Bless your difference and keep walking, because time puts everything in its place. And while many exhaust themselves trying to please everyone, you move forward. While many try to look good to others, you choose to be at peace with yourself. And that is what makes you invincible. Criticism hurts more when you're unsure of your path. But when you have clarity, criticism loses its power, not because it disappears, but because you stop feeding it with your attention. Let your actions speak. Let your example illuminate. Let your consistency disarm prejudice. Don't try to shout your worth. Live it. Epictetus made it clear, if you want to improve, be prepared to be ridiculed. But he also said that if you stay firm, those who ridiculed you will one day admire you in silence. Not because you changed to please them, but because you didn't change to please them. That's the power of the Stoic. He isn't cold, he isn't indifferent, he is unbreakable. And you can reach that point too, when your decisions align with your values. When you stop living to please. When your inner peace becomes more important than your outward image. Today you can choose. You can keep explaining yourself or keep walking. You can stay trapped in others' opinions or live with such coherence that your actions speak for you. And when you do, when you wake each day with the serenity of someone who has nothing to prove, when your steps reflect what your words no longer need to say, then you will have found one of the most powerful forms of emotional freedom. The kind that isn't achieved by shouting but in silence. the kind that isn't imposed but earned, the kind that doesn't need witnesses but transforms everything it touches, because in the end your best argument will always be your life. Stoic lesson. 8th, external criticism never defines your identity. For years you lived believing you were what others said you were, that if someone called you weak, then you must be, that if someone called you selfish, maybe you needed to change, that if you weren't liked, it was your fault. And so little by little you gave away the power to define yourself. Every word from the outside became a sentence. Every glance turned into silent judgment, and every criticism became a distorted reflection you mistook for truth. But tell me, how often did that criticism come from people who didn't truly know you, from people who saw only a tiny fraction of your story and thought they had the right to judge the whole of you? We've been taught to fear what others say more than to trust what we feel, to seek to fit in rather than to understand ourselves, to react to every opinion instead of building a solid identity from within. Epictetus explained it with brutal clarity. We are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions we have about them, and that applies just as much to others' opinions about us, because in truth, those words have no power until you choose to give them meaning. Think of it this way. When someone calls you a failure, but you know you're learning, who's right? When they accuse you of being cold, but you're actually healing deep wounds, who sees clearly? When they label you arrogant, but you're just protecting your dignity, who knows the truth? Criticism doesn't define. It only reveals the lens of the one criticizing. And if you don't filter those words with discernment, you'll end up carrying identities that were never yours. That's why Stoicism emphasizes inner life. It urges you to build an image of yourself that doesn't rely on someone else's reflection, but instead stands firm and clear, rooted in your values, your actions, and your truth. Seneca put it plainly, "The greatest slavery is to depend on the judgment of others." And he was right, because when your identity is built from the outside, any criticism is a threat. But when it's built from within, criticism is just background noise. There's a big difference between listening with humility and letting yourself be defined by what people say. Listening helps you grow, but assuming every opinion is truth traps you in an invisible prison. Look inside yourself. How many times have you stopped acting for fear of being judged? How many times have you stayed silent for fear of appearing weak? How many times have you betrayed yourself just to avoid criticism? And the worst of all, how many times have you believed you were what they said you were? Not anymore. Today you can break that cycle. Today you can look inward and start remembering who you are beyond every external judgment. Are you sensitive? That's not weakness, it's depth. Are you firm? That's not arrogance, it's clarity. Are you reserved? That's not coldness, it's protection. Are you intense? That's not exaggeration, it's passion. Other people's words can't grasp your complexity. They can't understand the weight of your silences or the source of your choices. They can't define you because they haven't walked in your shoes or fought your battles. That's why the real work isn't about silencing external voices. It's about strengthening your own. That inner voice that knows who you are, the one that's been with you through every fall, the one that doesn't judge but guides. And yes, that voice may have been drowned out many times by outside noise, but it isn't broken. It just needs you to listen again, to give it back the place it deserves, to let it, not the world, define you, because only you know how far you've come. Only you know how hard it was to forgive, how painful it was to let go, what it meant to keep going. And that can't be measured by criticism. Marcus Aurelius understood it with unshakable wisdom. The soul becomes invincible when it stops being a slave to opinions. And you're here to build that invincibility, not as armor, but as roots. Roots that go so deep into your truth that no external wind can uproot them. Next time you're criticized, pause. Not to defend yourself, but to observe. Does it come from someone who truly knows you? Does it reflect a truth that resonates with you? Or is it just an echo of someone else's pain, ignorance, or judgment? Then decide. Decide whether it deserves space inside you, whether that judgment holds value or is just another stone on your path you can leave behind. Because you are not what they say. You are what you do with what they say. You are what you choose to believe about yourself. You are what you hold on to, even when no one else sees it. And in that choice lies your freedom. The freedom to not react, but to respond. To not defend yourself, but to reaffirm yourself. To not destroy the other, but to strengthen yourself. When you become immune to criticism, it's not because you no longer care, but because you've learned that no one else has the right to define your identity. That is yours, only yours, and it is sacred. If this knowledge is helping you grow stronger, subscribe and join this refuge where we learn to protect our peace and stop living at the rhythm of others' criticism. Here, we cultivate a firm mind and a free soul. Stoic lesson. 9th. Criticizing is easy. Living with virtue is not. It's easy to speak from the sidelines, easy to point out flaws, to judge others' decisions, to mock someone's stumbles. Anyone can throw out an opinion. Anyone can type a hurtful comment, pass judgment without knowing the story, point a finger without ever getting their hands dirty. But very few have the courage to live with integrity. Very few choose the hard path of virtue, of self-awareness, of self-restraint, of humility. And you knew that, even if it was hard to accept, because for a long time you felt inferior to those who criticized you. They made you question your choices. They made you feel small, insecure, weak. But over the years, you started to wake up. You began to realize a powerful truth. Those who constantly criticize are not living well. The great sages have known this for centuries. Seneca was unrelenting when he said, "It is the mark of a base mind to always look for faults in others." And he was right. Criticizing is easy. It doesn't require discipline or courage or experience. Just a bit of pride and a comfortable place to throw stones. Living with virtue, on the other hand, is a completely different story. It means examining your thoughts, questioning your impulses, correcting yourself when no one is watching, owning your mistakes and trying again. All of this while the world cheers the loudest voices and ignores those who struggle quietly with dignity. You know what it costs to try and do the right thing when no one notices. You know the pain of failing but refusing to quit. You know how heavy it is to choose the harder path when the easy one is paved with false praise. And yet, here you are, trying, learning, growing, while others sit safely on the sidelines throwing stones. So hear this clearly. Do not let the voices of those who build nothing destroy what you are building. Because a purposeful life doesn't need validation, it needs conviction. Marcus Aurelius captured it in a phrase that deserves to be carved into the soul. The best revenge for criticism is to be unlike the one who uttered it. And that's where the real power lies, not in silencing others, but in living so aligned with your values that criticism loses all meaning. Because who is stronger, the one who shouts from pride, or the one who breathes calmly, the one who wounds with words, or the one who builds with actions, the one who judges from ignorance, or the one who grows through learning? The critic doesn't take risks. They don't expose themselves. They don't self-reflect. They project their own frustrations onto others. And you were not born for that. You were born to create, not to destroy, to understand, not to attack, to transform your pain, not pass it on. Each time you choose the path of virtue, you are showing a strength that most people do not possess. Each time you act with temperance instead of reacting with rage, you win an invisible battle. Each time you refuse to return criticism with hatred, you cultivate something the world desperately needs: character. And yes, it hurts sometimes. It hurts to be misunderstood. It hurts when your intentions are judged. It hurts when people speak of you without truly knowing you. But remember this: no unjust criticism can destroy a life lived with integrity. Criticism fades, coherence remains, words get lost in the wind, your example endures. Epictetus said it simply, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And that's exactly what you're doing each time you respond with virtue instead of vengeance. Because anyone can criticize, but few can live with virtue, and you are among those few. Next time someone judges you, ask yourself, does this person live with the same standards they use to judge? Are they willing to confront their own shadows before pointing out mine? Have they walked the path I'm walking? If the answer is no, then you don't need to defend yourself. You need to remember that you are on a higher path, one that not everyone is ready to walk. And if any criticism hits a wound inside you, use it. Not to punish yourself, but to heal, not to crumble, but to grow stronger. Because even someone else's judgment can become fuel for your inner fire. The difference lies in how you process it, in how you choose to move forward, in what mindset you face the external noise. True strength is not shouted. It's revealed in every decision, in every pause before reacting, in every boundary you uphold, in every moment you choose to be yourself instead of needing to be right. That is virtue, that is freedom. So today, when the weight of an unfair criticism tries to pull you down, breathe. Remember your path. Remember your effort. Remember that you are choosing something few dare to choose. Because living by virtue isn't easy, but it's real. It's not comfortable, but it's authentic. It's not instant, but it's lasting. And on that path, criticism isn't an obstacle, it's a test. And with every step, you are proving that you can pass it without losing yourself. That's what makes you invincible. That's what makes you stoic. Stoic, Lesson 10th. You are free when criticism no longer controls you. There is a silent kind of slavery most people carry without even realizing it. It has no visible chains, no iron bars or shackles, but it weighs you down, it suffocates, and it conditions every decision you make. It's the slavery of living for the approval of others, the invisible prison of what will they say, one you built yourself, brick by brick, over the years. Because from a young age you were taught to please, to earn approval as a reward, to fear rejection as punishment. And little by little, you started adapting to what others expected of you. You stopped saying what you really thought. You stopped doing what you truly wanted. You became a master at hiding your essence, just to avoid making anyone uncomfortable. And what did you gain from it? Anxiety, self-doubt, guilt for being yourself, and a deep emotional dependence, where a single criticism could crush you from the inside out. But that's not living, that's surviving to please, and you know it. True freedom, as Marcus Aurelius said, is not doing whatever you want, but not being swept away by passions or the opinions of others. And that includes one of the most subtle and dangerous ones, the fear of being judged. Because as long as you need outside validation to feel worthy, you'll always be in chains. As long as you fear disappointing others more than betraying yourself, you'll remain imprisoned. The Stoic path offers a different option. It invites you to reclaim your inner sovereignty, to become the only valid judge of your life, not from pride, but from temperance, not from rebellion, but from clarity. The kind of clarity that lets you look criticism in the face and ask, is there truth in this for me or not? Nothing more. No drama, no victimhood, no need to defend yourself. That is emotional freedom, to hear what others think of you, without letting it determine what you think of yourself. Epictetus said it with surgical precision. He who seeks to please others becomes their slave. And you've decided not to be a slave anymore. That's why you're here. That's why you're training in the most demanding and liberating philosophy there is. Not to become cold or arrogant, but to live with integrity, with your own direction, with a peace that doesn't depend on the winds of opinion. Because tell me something, aren't you tired of measuring your steps by other people's glances? Aren't you drained from postponing your dreams out of fear of what they'll say? Doesn't it hurt to keep silencing your truth just to avoid judgment? You weren't born to please the masses. You came to embody your purpose, to live from your center. And that means letting go of your addiction to approval. Yes, they might criticize you. They might say you've changed, that you've become selfish, that you're not the same anymore. But that's the sign that you're finally shedding what they expected of you, to become who you truly are. You don't owe the world an explanation. You don't have to justify every step. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth. You are worthy because of who you are, not because of how others see you. And when that truth takes root within you, something shifts. You no longer react with rage to an unjust comment. You no longer collapse from a negative opinion. You stop chasing approval with every glance. You become solid, unshakable, free, like a mountain facing the wind, like a tree that doesn't argue with the storm but never bends to it. That is stoic strength, to know yourself so deeply that nothing external can take away your center. And that doesn't mean ignoring everything. It means evaluating criticism with maturity, distinguishing the useful from the toxic, listening but never submitting, because sometimes a sincere critique can help you grow, but a destructive one only deserves your silence. You decide what enters and what doesn't. You decide what nourishes your soul and what poisons it. And in that decision lies your freedom. So today, remember this. Each time a criticism shakes you, ask yourself if you're living for you or for them. Each time someone's judgment wounds you, ask yourself if that wound wasn't already open. Each time you doubt yourself because of what someone said, remember, only you have the final authority over your identity. The world can give its opinions, but you choose who you are. The world can judge, but you decide how you live. The world can point fingers, but you choose whether to stand tall or shrink in fear. That decision always will be yours. And in that decision lies your freedom, because no one is truly free until they stop being controlled by criticism. And you are ready for that freedom, a freedom that doesn't scream, that doesn't need to prove anything, that simply breathes in the calm of someone who no longer kneels before anyone's opinion. That is the goal. That is the destiny of the Stoic soul. And you're getting closer every day. There comes a moment in life when you stop. Not because you're tired, not because you've been defeated, but because you no longer want to walk paths traced by others. And that moment is sacred. Maybe you're standing right there, at that uncomfortable silence where you don't know whether to keep hiding your feelings to avoid judgment, or finally dare to live your truth, even if it means losing some people. At that edge where one more step might cost you others' approval, but finally win you back to yourself. That is the moment when the soul awakens and decides it will no longer trade its peace just to fit in. For far too long you confused being liked with being worthy. You were trained to please, to soften your edges, to silence your thoughts, to be good, even if that meant swallowing your emotions. But you didn't come into this life to live under the judgment of others. You came to embody a life aligned with what is true for you. External criticism is inevitable, but becoming its slave is a choice, and that choice no longer represents you. You've begun to open your eyes. You've realized you cannot control what others think or say, but you can choose what value to give it. You've discovered that your identity cannot depend on words thrown into the air, on labels without roots, on rushed judgments from those who don't know your story. What others think of you does not define you. What you choose to believe about yourself does. And that's where true transformation begins. Not when everyone applauds you, not when criticism disappears, but when you no longer need any of it to feel at peace. You realize you don't always need the last word, that sometimes the greatest show of strength is silence, that you don't have to convince anyone, or defend yourself from everything, or react with anger to avoid being stepped on. It's enough to stand firm in who you are and keep walking. It's not easy. It hurts to be misunderstood. It burns to not be seen clearly. But that pain is the price of an authentic life, and it's worth every tear, every doubt, every awkward silence. Because beyond that discomfort, there is freedom. The freedom to be yourself without asking permission. The freedom to live in alignment with your soul. The freedom to stop fearing rejection because you're no longer willing to reject yourself. And you're not alone on this path. There are many of us who've chosen to stop living chained to the eyes of others. We are a community that values virtue over popularity, temperance over drama, inner truth over easy applause. We are united by the desire to live with purpose, to not let criticism steal our peace, to not allow someone else's judgment to measure our worth. Maybe you don't have all the answers yet. Maybe it still hurts what someone said. Maybe it's still hard not to react, but you're awake. And that changes everything. You're learning to breathe before responding, to observe your emotions without being pulled by them, to keep your center even when the world tries to knock it loose. You are building a fortress that cannot be seen, but can be felt. And every day you choose calm over noise, you are winning. If this Stoic session supported you, if at any point it felt like we were speaking to your soul, if a single word brought you clarity or comfort or truth, stay with us. This is not a space of perfection. It's a refuge for souls tired of pretending, a home for those seeking freedom without arrogance, strength without aggression, peace without submission. And if something you heard today planted clarity in you, don't let it go. Make it yours. Make it habit. Make it your way of life. Because being free from criticism doesn't mean it stops hurting. It means that despite the pain, you choose to remain firm. It means you no longer let a single opinion break you inside. It means you know who you are, even when the world doubts you. And that certainty, that quiet resolve, is what makes you a true Stoic. Thank you for walking this path with us. Thank you for daring to look inward, and thank you for reminding us that the greatest victory is the one won within the soul. If this session brought you value, subscribe, share it, and comment below. My peace is no longer negotiable. Because when you say those words, you're not just making a statement, you're choosing a path, and we'll be here, walking it with you. Your voice matters here. Every reflection strengthens and uplifts this community. The most supported comment will be pinned as the banner of our Stoic collective, a community that does not run from pain, but walks through it with courage, wisdom, and honor. To join this Stoic movement is to break the chains that limit you and build an inner fortress that no one can tear down. Follow us if you never want to miss another Stoic reflection. Remember, every decision shapes your character. In the pinned comment you'll find 2 paths, each for a reason. There are decisions that seem small, but change everything. If something inside you shifted while hearing this, don't let it slip away. Subscribing isn't just a click. It's a decision to stop living asleep, to walk with awareness, courage, and purpose. And if you choose to support this space as a member, you're not just giving, you're planting. Thanks to you, this flame stays alive. Your presence allows us to keep sharing wisdom in a noisy world, building together a community of awake, steady, and free souls. We'll see you in our next encounter at Stoicism for Winners, where we'll keep exploring the riches of Stoic wisdom for modern life. Until then, remember, you are the sole master of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the Stoic legacy, the art of being invincible.